Hi everyone, welcome back to Mad About Cards and Crafts. Today I have a little Christmas cheer that I'm bringing to you featuring this A2 size card. We're going to do a little ink blending, a little stenciling, and a little bit of Copic coloring. Here are the products that I used on the card. I do have the Glitz Glitter Gel in gold. I also have Distress Oxide inks in Festive Berry, Candied Apple, Ripe Persimmon, and finally dried marigold. The three stamp sets that were included in the October box of the month were the Ornamental Christmas, Gingerbread Kisses, and finally Merry Mugs. I also bring in from another release from the Not Too Shabby shop this I Heart Coffee, and there is a face in there that I'm going to add to my mug. Let's jump right into the project. I'm going to start by stamping onto a piece of Copic Express It paper using some Brutus Monroe Raven ink. This Raven ink is a hybrid ink, so you can use it for Copic coloring as well as watercoloring. It is my favorite ink at the moment. I absolutely love working with this ink. I have an A2 size card panel, so this is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I believe it's called Accent Opaque paper. So this white cardstock I'm going to do some ink blending on. I started with my dried marigold, and now I'm going to add a little bit of ripe persimmon. Once I have that ripe persimmon down, I'll bring back in the dried marigold. I'll go back with the ripe persimmon, and I'm going to go over this panel a couple of times just to get myself a very nice transition and a beautiful even blend. I add the festive berries. Nope. I add the candied apple because the candied apple is a little bit more of a true red tone. So I added the candied apple, and finally I add the festive berries. The festive berries is a red with more of an orange undertone. I thought that it went really well with this card, but I didn't want to put it next to the ripe persimmon because I thought that it would just blend into each other a little bit too much, and I wanted to have a little bit more contrast. So as I mentioned, I will go over this a couple of times. I do have a piece of white paper right there. That's just to prevent me from getting any fingerprints. I didn't show this 6x6 stencil. This was released in one of the boxes of the month. I want to say it was either the September or August box of the month, and it's called Knit. This was designed by our very own Call Me Crafty Al, and I love this stencil. So I'm going to use that Glitz Glitter Gel. You will notice that I do cover mine with Saran Wrap because I want to make sure that I can preserve it as long as possible. I live in a very dry climate, so things dry out fairly easily. I've had this for about 2 years. It's getting just a little bit thicker. There you can see the beautiful panel, and with those vibrant oranges in the background and that gold contrasting on it, I just thought that it was such a beautiful pop of color. So I did take the stencil and I did take the palette knife over to the sink to wash those immediately, and I cleaned up my work surface immediately. I'm starting with my first image, which is one of the Merry Mugs, and I'm going to add a teal color combination. So I started with my darkest color, which was a BG75. I blended that out with a BG72, and then finally I finished off that large white space with the BG70. Then I came back in a second time with the BG75 and I blended those shadows out even further. I did the same thing with the BG72, and then I closed up where the highlight would be and I finished it off with the BG70. Now I will color the handle, and there I took my midtone, which was the BG72, and I went over the entire image, and that gave me that nice highlight, but it also gave me a beautiful blend. For the hat, I'm using some red oranges. So I started with my darkest color, which was an R14. I blended that out with an R12, and then I'll bring in my lightest color for the highlight, which will be my R11. I do end up going tip to tip with my R14 and my R12 because I just felt I wasn't getting the correct blend with the R14 and the R12. So a trick is to go right there, tip to tip, take your lighter marker to the tip of your darkest marker, and then that will help with the blend, and I liked that so much better. Off camera, I did color up the holly leaf using a BG90 and a BG93, and now we're moving on to the ornament. So I'm staying in the same color tones. I'm keeping it teal, just not quite as dark as my first combination. So I started with the BG18. I'm blending it out with the BG15. And then you'll see for the most part, I go from the end in on my third color, which is going to be a BG13. So for these ornaments on the ribbon, I definitely wanted more of a flicking motion. I wanted to get a little bit of that texture in the bow. And I wasn't looking for that perfect smooth blend. I was looking more for a little bit of texture there. I did use my darkest marker on the area where the ribbon is curved. So this area that I'm coloring right here to the right, there's kind of like where the loop is of that bow. I did end up using my darkest color BG18 and a little bit of the BG15 in there. For the knot in the bow, I'm going to go around in a circle, starting with the BG18 on the outside, blending it with the BG15, and then finally the center of the knot will be a BG13. I'm going to finish the ornament with the same R markers that I used on the hat. Now, I do want to preface this that, again, the blending wasn't what I was anticipating. You see that I'm adding a little bit of an arc at the bottom of that ornament to give some curvature to the ornament, and then I go underneath it with the R12. I'm blending it out with the R12, and then I'll come into that white space with the R11. I'll do it a second time, and then I'm going to move on. But as I sat and looked at it, I didn't like the blend as much, so I did come back in again, go over the colors a third time, did that tip to tip, and I liked the way that the ornament turned out much better. For some reason, I don't know if maybe I need a little bit more ink in my R12 and I might get a better blend, but for some reason there was just a little bit disparity between those two colors. For the top of the ornament, I'm using a gold color, so it's called Y28, and it's called Lionette Gold. And then I did color my gingerbread men off screen. So on the outside of the gingerbread men, I started with an E55. I blended it out, I believe it was with an E52, and finally I finished with an E50. I'm adding some accents using a number 5 gel pen. So for the gingerbread men that's right at the top right there or on the right, I did use some dots. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of accent to the second gingerbread men. I want to say that the hat was the same color as the mug hat, and I kept all of the colors the same throughout. I colored another ornament, that one that's on the paper that hasn't been cut out yet. I used the same colors as the first ornament, just in the reverse order. I'm going to take my Memento black tuxedo pen and I'm going to go around the edges. I want to mention that my brother Scan and Cut, for whatever reason, cut a tiny border, even though I didn't choose a border on my second die cut, so it didn't cut on the line like the other two. Rather than trimming it, because as I've mentioned a million times, I'm a terrible fussy cutter, I just left it as is. I didn't think that it was that big of a deal. I'm adding my face from the I Heart Coffee stamp set to my mug. And I just love that little bit of whimsy on the card. I have an A2 size top folding card base, so this is 4¼ by 5½ inches. I did stamp my sentiment, which says Jingle All the Way. I stamped it in that Brutus Monroe Raven ink, and then I fussy cut it out as best that I possibly could, and then I used some of that dried marigold over the top. The Jingle All the Way comes from the Ornamental Christmas stamp set. I'm going to use my art glitter glue to place my ornaments and this little mug in place, and then I'm going to add my gingerbread men. So I'm going to tuck this one between those two ornaments, and I'll tuck the other one a little bit higher to the right. As you notice, I do have 5 images, so that odd number just makes my heart a little bit happier, and it gives a little bit more balance to the card. I'm going to adhere my sentiment that says Jingle All the Way. Finally, we're going to add some crystal stickles, and that's going to be my card for today. So I want to thank you so much for joining me. The box of the month has sold out, but the new box of the month is coming November 1st. Make sure that you watch for the hop. Not Too Shabby Shop is going to have a hop, and they are going to share all the inspiring projects they've been creating for the November box of the month. Thanks so much for watching. Have a fabulous day.